Welcome into episode 122 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm August Trometer.
Unrest in the Nest, teaching police departments about safety, and all of your Apple gear Ken has updates. Do the kids still do the Ken has thing?
No.
Yeah, well. Time once again for The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. 5 minutes of sheer terror for one San Francisco Bay Area family this week. According to a piece from the Mercury News out of San Jose, a family in the picturesque town of Orinda received a warning over the weekend about an incoming missile attack from North Korea. According to the piece, a loud squawking, similar to the beginning of an emergency broadcast alert, blasted from the living room, followed by a detailed warning of 3 North Korean intercontinental ballistic missiles headed to Los Angeles, Chicago, and Ohio. The woman featured in the story said it warned that the United States had retaliated against Pyongyang and that people in the affected areas had 3 hours to evacuate. It sounded completely legit, and it was loud and got our attention right off the bat. It was 5 minutes of sheer terror and another 30 minutes trying to figure out what was going on. Of course, you probably heard by now that we were not attacked by North Korea last weekend. In fact, you probably didn't even hear the warning. It would seem that only this family did. That's because the alert came from the East Bay family's Nest surveillance camera, which had been hacked to deliver the bogus warning. Quoting the Mercury News, after many panicked minutes and phone calls to 911 and to Nest, the couple learned they likely were the victims of a hacker. And that panic turned to anger when they found out that Nest knew that there had been a number of such incidents, none involving nuclear strike scenarios, but failed to alert customers. The woman in the report said a Nest supervisor told them Sunday that they likely were the victims of a third-party hack that gained access to their camera and its speakers. A Google spokesperson, the search engine owns Nest, said Nest was not breached in this incident. These recent reports are based on customers using compromised passwords exposed through breaches on other websites. In nearly all cases, two-factor verification eliminates this type of security risk, the company said in an email statement. We take security in the home extremely seriously, and we're actively introducing features that will reject compromised passwords, allow customers to monitor access to their accounts, and track external entities that abuse credentials. So the woman interviewed for this piece wants to blame Nest. Is she right to do so in your estimation?
No.
Okay.
You know, the thing is when your power goes out, what's the first thing you do? You walk outside and you look to see if everybody else's power's out.
Right.
And if she walked outside and didn't see the entire neighborhood fleeing for their lives, then she probably could have assumed that everything was just okay, but weird and something strange was going on. I don't think Nest is to blame at all here. I think, somebody got into their system for one reason or another.
Okay. Well, I mean, right, because how likely is Nest going to be to call, the local news station and say, hey, listen, every now and then people are hacking into our devices, because then you have to expect that call from, Lenovo and HP and Apple and everybody else. I mean, you have electronics. Sometimes people hack into electronics and it's kind of bad.
As we add more Internet of things, more stuff like this is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And we just have to be vigilant ourselves. I mean, there's a certain level of responsibility that you have for yourself in order to make sure that you're not hacked and then if something does happen, that you at least question it before having 5 minutes of sheer terror.
See, there's the thing. I mean, I don't think there's anything you can necessarily do to make sure that you're not hacked, except a lot of the best practices stuff that we've talked about before. For example,
exactly.
I mean, assuming that Nest's username and passwords weren't leaked online, the most likely scenario is that this family was reusing passwords on multiple accounts. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. This, especially because Nest has said that that's generally what the cases are when this happens. I'm sure that this happened with this family as well.
You want to I like the parts of the show where we sort of do our creative writing thing. Do you want to talk about why you think this happened? Because, I mean, there are two things that I thought of immediately, and I'm curious if you had any thoughts, like, not about the family, because, I mean, they were, I don't even know how to say it. I want to say it in a way that's nice, because kind of like we talked about last week with the smart TVs, you get one of these things, you want to set it up really quickly. You don't really think about maybe what are all the best ways I could do this. You think, okay, well, it needs a password. Great. I gave it a password. It's the same one I use for my email, but who cares? Because nobody knows that either, and they'll never, ever, ever find it ever. I mean, I kind of don't want to blame these people too much, because this is definitely a learning experience for all involved. I do, however, want to have fun with why it was that this happened. Why? I mean, well, what leapt to mind for you?
Well, you know, when somebody gets murdered, the first thing the police do is look at all of the people that person knew. Mm-hmm. And I think in this case, it's really easy to say it's probably a neighbor. Maybe they had a kid that was doing online games and somebody wanted to get back at him. But I really think they were targeted specifically to be given 5 minutes of sheer terror. And it's probably somebody that they know either online or, you know, locally.
See, and again, this part is just conjecture. I mean, we do actually know, because we both read the Mercury News story. I mean, there was a kid involved. The kid was 8 years old. And so I don't know that, well, I don't know what level of culpability that young child would have. See, the thing that I was thinking about, honestly, is it probably, to me, in my head canon anyway, it was two things. Either it's really like you know, bad guys who are really bad, who are trying to get those people to leave their house in terror so that they could quickly do something to their house. More likely, it seems to me, it was somebody doing it for lulz. I mean, they can see them right through the Nest camera. And so when they sent this message, they have to have been sitting there laughing their heads off at the people freaking out, I would think.
Yeah, both of those scenarios are definitely possible. You know, I always think about, why are they a target? And if it's random, then, you know, both of your then that second scenario fits the bill. If it's not random, then it is probably somebody who, you know, just wanted them to leave or is trying to get back at them for some reason.
Yeah. No, well, we may never know. If we do, it'll be really interesting. I kind of want to see the movie, honestly. Not the movie that they may have taken of the family freaking out, the movie about it, starring, I don't know, Tom Hanks and somebody else, because I want to see Tom Hanks and everything. To give Nest some credit here, the piece has an assistant professor of computer science at the College of William and Mary saying that the Nest platform is reasonably secure in comparison to other similar platforms. In such cases, the problem most often lies in how the devices are configured and used in the smart home, especially in terms of setting the account password. I'm trying to remember, have we ever talked about ways to make strong passwords before?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised, you know, this being a security show. And
yeah,
everything.
We should do that at some point, I would think. I mean, let's do really quickly. I mean, we talked last week, I think it was, or maybe it was the week before, about using a password manager. The biggest thing, though, the biggest thing is just not reusing passwords.
Absolutely.
I was going to say everywhere, but really anywhere, right? Anywhere.
And don't use passwords that can be directly traced back to your personal information. You don't want to use like the first four digits of your address as a PIN, you know, things like that. That's how hackers get in, is because you've either reused a password or you've got a password that is, you know, so unique to you that they can go, oh, well, it's his wife's birth date. And there you go. They're in.
The computer sciences professor I mentioned a moment ago also addressed the password reuse issue, the one that we were just talking about, and mentioned a moment ago as well. The Merc says that he said that the recycling of passwords for multiple online services is even more troubling now with the prevalence of in-home Wi-Fi enabled devices that provide a hacker access inside someone's property. If even one of the services is compromised, the attacker can use the password to gain access to everything else, he said. I would definitely recommend using a password manager to use different passwords for all services and enabling two-factor authentication. Now, I will say, if you're bothered that a service that you use doesn't employ two-factor authentication, check again. I got an email from a service that I used the other day, except no, I didn't. It looked like an email from that service. It really looked a lot like it. But, even if it looked exactly like it, I would still be inclined to go to the service itself rather than clicking on a link in the email. So that's what I did. I went and I checked out the information online, not by clicking the link in the email, but by going to the service. And everything was fine. But then I noticed that they have, since the last time I checked those settings, they've actually they haven't enabled two-factor authentication. They now offer it. I've now enabled it. So if there's a service that you use that you wish had 2FA, it might be worth taking another look.
Yeah, and most of the reputable services out there have added two-factor, or they are currently adding it because it is so important to security these days. If you're going to like Bob's Costume Shop and Cigarette Emporium online, they probably don't offer it. But if there's a service that you use that stores your personal information that doesn't have two-factor, email their support team. Ask them for it. Ask them multiple times. The more you bug them, the more likely they are to add it, and that will help protect your data.
Well, good on us. We've solved the Internet of Things thing for everybody. I'm feeling good about that. It's been a long time coming, but we got it.
We're superheroes.
I know. Well, hold on, because now we have to do it for law enforcement. Yeah, I know. TechCrunch has a disappointing, though hardly surprising story of information being collected by police departments being left online for all the world to see. The story centers on ALPR, or Automatic License Plate Recognition Systems. According to TechCrunch, these cameras are dotted across the U.S. and are controlled mostly by police departments and government agencies to track license plates and people from place to place. In doing so, they can reveal where you live, where you go, and who you see. The piece goes on to say that some cameras are connected to the internet and are easily identifiable. Worse, some are leaking sensitive data about vehicles and their drivers, and many have weak security protections that make them easily accessible. The piece says the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, actually raised awareness around this issue back in 2015, apparently to no avail. Flash forward to now, and the article says in the course of a week, TechCrunch found more than 150 ALPR devices from several manufacturers connected and searchable on the internet. Many ALPR cameras were entirely exposed or would have been easily accessible with little effort. Of the ALPR cameras TechCrunch identified, the majority had a default password documented in its support guides, though TechCrunch points out they didn't use any of those passwords as that would have been unlawful. Dave Moss of the EFF is quoted in the piece as saying, "It doesn't surprise us to hear that the problems are still ongoing. What we tend to find is that law enforcement will get sold this technology and see it as a one-time investment, but don't invest in cybersecurity to protect the information or the devices themselves." And again, we go back to the smart TV issue from last week, right?
Oh, yeah, this is crazy. I can just imagine that most of these devices have a username of admin and a password of password.
Man, no, that's going to be too long. We'll need you to change that to 12341234.
Again, with the Internet of Things, it's going to get even scarier. And the fact that this is law enforcement doing this and not securing these cameras just really, really is irresponsible. And it's, we're the ones paying the price.
Well, there was a thing somewhere in this article in TechCrunch, and I don't know that I reference it here in what we're doing now, but like one of the camera systems that TechCrunch came across was one that was set up in 2004. I mean, we were not nearly as savvy in 2004 as we are today, but the thing is, if the system is still working, nobody is looking at it as something that's broken or that something needs to be fixed or tended. It's still doing what it did when we set it up in 2004. The only problem is so many people know so much more than they did then that, I mean, you might as well just tape the password to the side of the camera.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of businesses that they hire somebody to do a website for them. Mm-hmm. And then they just go, okay, well, we've got our website. We don't need anything else. And they let that person go away. And, then after 5 or 8 years, it's looking like it was done on an old version of Word. And, but it works for them. So they leave it. And we are probably going to see a lot of that because it's all budgetary.
Well, I mean, and also just not knowing what you don't know. Right. I mean, somebody somewhere, especially, when there was a huge suddenly, surge of money around security spending sort of around the turn of the century for whatever reason, or around the turn of millennium for whatever reason, lots of money got thrown at stuff and people just like, great, now we have this security stuff. And so they feel secure. Never mind the fact, you build stuff and you have to reinforce that stuff or you have to maintain that stuff anyway.
It really is going to be a problem moving forward when they just leave all this legacy technology.
Now, the piece goes on to highlight a number of ALPR cameras viewable on Shodan, the search engine for internet-connected devices. EFF's Moss says, in California, you're responsible under state law to maintain reasonable security practices to protect against unauthorized access. If it turns out that somebody is harmed because they put a license plate reader up and it didn't have basic security like password protections, that person can be on the hook for punitive damages. I guess one of the biggest questions I have, though, is how would you know that that's how or why somebody was able to find somebody else?
If somebody does something bad to you and you can catch that person, then maybe interrogation would work. But other than that, I think it'd be a real challenge to find out whether somebody's going through that data and what they're using it for.
Especially if you're dealing with a police force that doesn't even realize that they're leaking this information online.
Exactly.
I mean, really, seriously, or you have one of those, cartoon criminals from television who will immediately tell you what they did and why.
Right.
I don't know. Now, I say a lot on this show that I like to bring stories that have a solution, that give people sort of a course of action, like, you don't reuse passwords, stuff like that. That makes this story kind of tough. I guess one solution is just awareness, right? Like knowing that this is a thing that's going on may be helpful because, then the issue can be raised with law enforcement, except I'm not going to call law enforcement. And like I just said a minute ago, it sounds like even if you did ask local law enforcement whether this was going on, they might not know.
I suppose you could always pull a Steve Jobs and just not put license plates on your car.
You could do that. Because that never leads to you being pulled over. Especially, I could tell you a story, but I won't. Now, there is one potentially saving grace coming to us, again, through California. Quoting TechCrunch, starting next year, California law will ban internet-connected devices manufactured or sold in the state if they contain weak or default passwords that aren't unique to each device. Not only does that protect against hacking, it prevents easy hijacking from powerful network-crippling botnets. It sounds like they've legislated strong or, relatively strong passwords anyway that are unique out of the box. And I think unique is really the operative word there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a great step in the right direction. We're going to have to legislate some of this stuff in order to protect everyone.
I'm trying to remember, you don't have to have a password on an iPhone, do you?
No.
More and more you're being encouraged to, but you don't have to have one. I mean, is this the kind of thing, because that sounds like a difficult thing to legislate. You have to make a unique password for every single device you sell. Because if you're hoping to sell, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 of something, you have to come up with a system to do that. Would it be easier / better to just make it you can't operate this thing until you set a password of your own?
It could be, and we might get to that point. I think in terms of what Apple's doing, first they had the PIN, then they had the fingerprint authentication, and now it's face authentication. And every single step of the way, they've made protecting your data on your phone even easier. I loved fingerprint detection, but the face authentication is fantastic. I just don't even think about it being there, and it just works. And so as long as we can move into a direction where it's easier to secure your devices and, like you said, require you to use that technology, that's a good thing.
It just occurred to me, though, does that mean that every iPhone is going to have a password starting this year? It says a California law will ban internet-connected devices. I know. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because we actually don't have the law in front of us. So we can't say. It's just weird. It hadn't occurred to me that, like, I can have no password on my Mac if I want no password on my Mac. I wonder if I buy a Mac in 2019 or 2020, will that still be the case? But you know what? We'll find out when I buy my next Mac. What do you say? While the law only applies to California, that's really the ball game, right? I mean, California is big enough that nobody's going to be like, okay, fine, well, we'll just not sell in California. At the same time, they're not likely to produce one device for California and another device for everywhere else. I mean, at least, maybe internationally you might do that, but state to state to state, if they have to do this for California, that pretty much means the one I buy in New York, Tennessee, Florida, any place else is going to play by the California rule.
Yeah, I mean, as they say, as California goes, so does the country. So I'm excited to see this put in place. I think it's, like I said, a great step forward.
And as far as devices that are already out there, is it just awareness?
Yeah, just being aware. If you can change passwords, change them. If you can't, get new devices. In a moment, a word about some updates that may be right for you. But first, a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. Everything about everything that we do on the checklist is about keeping your data safe, or at least making you aware of things that you can do to keep your data safe. And here's what's cool. MacScan 3 is about that as well. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for well over a decade. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Just as there are updates waiting for you, there is a free trial of MacScan waiting for you as well. Sign up for that 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by SecureMac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. All right, we've teased the updates long enough. I think it's time that we jump into the whole update thing. What do you say? Okay, just a short reminder before we part ways today. Apple updated all of its operating systems this week, and you will want to update to them. In addition to the standard stability and compatibility stuff, iOS 12.1.3 addresses 23 security issues by my count. macOS Mojave 10.14.3 takes care of 20. watchOS 5.1.3 hits 13 security issues. And finally, tvOS 12.1.2 tackles 17 security concerns. In addition to the OS updates, Apple on Tuesday released Safari 12.0.3 and iCloud for Windows 7.10. Built for Sierra through Mojave, the Safari update hits 5 security issues. Same goes for iCloud for Windows 7.10. Built for Windows 7 or later, it too tackles 5 security flaws. I know you have... That's a lot of numbers.
That is a lot of numbers. Well, my point is, you'll want to go ahead and go for these things, right? I mean, there's nothing in the way of new features, I don't think. I mean, there are a couple of bug fixes that big enough that Apple said, by the way, this fixes this. But nothing, I don't think, was anything that was, keeping people up at night. I know you have things set to auto-update. Can you tell me again why things are set to auto-update?
Well, I auto-update things because I generally trust what Apple's doing. Mm-hmm. I've never been burnt by the whole, I updated and it bricked my phone syndrome. And quite honestly, I just don't like managing those things. But the real reason is that I always know I've got the latest and greatest with the most number of flaws patched. No software is perfect. Apple software isn't perfect. All of these updates have bug fixes and little fixes and are covering flaws that they've found or defects that they've found. And I want to make sure that that's what's on my phone, that's what's on my Mac, that's what's on my TV.
See, I think my thing is because I do a daily Apple News podcast, I'm not likely to forget that there was an update yesterday. So I tend to not have everything set to auto update because I'm going to know about it anyway. And I do want to make sure I don't get burned by something that happens in the first hour or two. But I mean, I know that Nicholas Raba and Nicholas Tonchek actually say the same thing. They have everything set to auto update as well. I think if you're not poring over Apple News or if you're not constantly hitting refresh on the App Store, everybody says it's a good idea. I think the only reason I don't do it is because, I know I'm going to read about it. So it's going to be something I'm going to be aware of anyway. Yeah,
I remember the dark days of Mac OS when they didn't have automatic software updates. And, you would check for updates like 8 times a day. It was like a monkey trying to get a treat. And now I don't have to do that.
That's true. Now, for anybody who wants the peace of mind that you found, that sort of Zen state of constantly being on the latest and the greatest, as you say, for people who want to do auto updates, how do they set them up? Let's start with the Mac.
Sure. On the Mac, you open up the App Store app. In the upper left-hand corner, click on where it says App Store, and then choose Preferences, and then Automatic Updates. And you can turn them on there.
Okay. For your iOS devices?
You use the Setting apps, choose General, and then choose Software Update, and then choose Automatic Updates.
And then the last one that we have is for Apple TV.
It is very similar to iOS. You choose the Settings app, but instead of General, you choose System, Software Updates, and then Automatically Update.
Now, you see, that is the kind of how-to that I like us to do. Right? I like being able to give people, because, it would have been so easy to do. This whole show could have been gloom and doom and see you next week. So, yeah.
But we're going to close on, hey, let's get some new shiny stuff on your devices.
Yeah, we're going to close with, hey, let's give you at least a couple of things that you can absolutely do to keep yourself safer. Now, here's the question. Are there other how-tos that you would like to hear? Are there general security questions or concerns that you would like to hear us hit? Our email address is checklist@securemac.com. Maybe something unusual happened and you're wondering whether you've been compromised somehow. We'd love to address your concerns on a future episode of this show. The way to get those concerns to us, checklist@securemac.com. Now, if you missed something on this week's show, or maybe you'd like to dive deeper into something that we've hit before, the place to do that is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes on every topic that we've covered to this point and any topics coming up. securemac.com/checklist. And if you want an easy way to remember that, remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.